With my review of the episode Chef Bob out now, I thought to myself, hey, how about I talk about the other episodes of that batch too, just for the heck of it. Which a lot of you wanted to see me do as well, apparently. I may not have had as strong opinions about them as I did with the episode I mentioned before, but it could still make for an interesting video. And since at the same time I also didn't want to do individual videos because it would just clutter up the channel with short videos of each individual episode, since like I said, I don't have that much to say about them, what I decided to do is talk about all 4 of them in this one comprehensive video, which means the episodes Krusty, Kleaners, Shopping List, Whale Watching and Patnocchio, as these were the 4 most recent ones as of the time of this recording. And because I have no idea which one of these to start with, we are just going to put them into a random number generator and see what happens. Patnocchio it is! So from what I've gathered, this seems to be the most divisive episode of these 4. Correct me if I'm wrong, it's not like there was a public outcry about this, but at least from what I've seen, people seem to not like this episode as much as the other 3. This is not going to affect my thoughts on it, just something to consider when talking about all 4 of them in succession. The premise of this one is essentially that it's just a retelling of Pinocchio with SpongeBob characters, and although it's not a beat-by-beat conversion of the story, it draws many parallels to it, and has all the characters dressed up as those from Pinocchio. Starting with Karen introducing us to this version of Bikini Bottom, dressed up as the computer fairy, which apparently is a real thing, and therefore a cool reference not more than 12 people in the audience will get. We then cut to Plankton trying to steal one of the patties Patrick was about to eat, and screaming in agony when Patrick accidentally sits on him. When Patrick tells SpongeBob that he heard a weird voice, he says that that's probably Patrick's conscience, and that he should do everything the voice tells him to do, essentially doing Plankton's job for him in the process. Plankton then tries to get Patrick to buy him a Krabby Patty, but the latter says that he first needs to do a couple of other chores, one of which actually leads us into the Goofy Goobers, which as you all know is the bar SpongeBob and Patrick end up in the first movie. This is a nice callback that I really appreciated, but I still wish it would have had a bigger impact on the plot, or possibly been the main setting for an entire episode. But whatever, I'm still glad they included it here, with Waiter and everything. Patrick then accuses Plankton of not actually being his conscience, because the latter doesn't like ice cream, and when he insists that he is, his nose starts growing just like in Pinocchio. Patrick also wants in on this fun and tells a couple of his own lies, and then the 2 of them do a nose fight, which causes them to get kicked out of the restaurant. Plankton then finally gets Patrick to buy him a Krabby Patty, only for him to accidentally throw it onto Pearl's car, that they follow to Goo Lagoon and almost get it back there, only for it to then get eaten by Pearl. You know, a whale. Just like there was one in Pinocchio. I think you get where this is going. So the 2 of them chase after the patty into Pearl's stomach, where they find Italian stereotype 675 trying to hide it from them. After a pretty funny fight scene inside his stomach, Pearl wishes for his stomach ache to go away, whereby Karen promptly appears to get Patrick and Plankton out of the whale's intestines. Plankton tries to run away, but gets held up by Patrick's actual conscience, who tells him to step on what he assumes is just a very snarky green single-celled bug. This one just really didn't need to exist, if we're being honest. Sure, there was some decent visuals sprinkled in here and there, and I liked unenthusiastic godmother Karen, but after all, it was just a watered down Pinocchio story with SpongeBob characters. Which isn't to say that it didn't add new elements to it and rather played with the source material, but the ones that it did add didn't justify having this setting, and would have worked just as fine in any other episode. The nose thing was a decent gimmick and fitting for Patrick's character, but also a plot device we have seen done better in other adaptations that utilized Pinocchio, like the Shrek films for example. This episode was not bad by any means, but also not special in any shape or form. Do you want ratings today? I'm gonna give ratings today. 5 out of 10. Next! Alright, I don't think I'm gonna go through this one in order, just because there really isn't much happening story-wise, and I feel like it's more centered on the slapstick and comedy, which, not to get ahead of myself here, but I feel like it works really well. The premise is that SpongeBob accidentally spills the order a customer in an office has made from the Krusty Krab all over the floor, and when he fails to clean it up, commits suicide.
We got Gotta get SpongeBob back!
Over the course of the episode, SpongeBob, with the help of Patrick, tries his best to redeem the Krusty Krab's honor by cleaning the entire office building. I honestly don't want to talk about this one too much, because there really is a lot of little stuff here to enjoy in terms of how bad a job they do at taking care of this place, to the point where by the end of it, the building is not even standing anymore. There are also a few running gags sprinkled in here and there, like this fish just trying to do his job in the midst of all this mayhem, or the security guard that has various arguments with his mom over the phone, that I kind of feel like it would ruin the experience if I were to spell out every single one of them for you, but I also like the twist of this company selling tanks as it turns out in the end, and how they are getting chased after by this entire army of office supplies. So yeah, this one was really fun and definitely one I'd see myself going back to, which makes me want to give it, let's say, an 8 out of 10. Also, I really want to have this poster. If you watched my video on Chef Bob, you know how excited I've been for this episode in particular. The last time we have seen both Pearl and Squidward having major interactions with each other, I think was in A Whale of a Birthday, and even then Squidward was more of a secondary character.
我的眼泪流不停，卫生纸就擦不停。
So seeing the focus on two of my all-time favorites had me get stoked to watch this one. And how did it turn out? Well, let's look at what happens first. Mr. Krabs wants to go play cards with the boys, whoever that is supposed to be, which means that Pearl has to stay home with Squidward, who is to babysit her. Pearl, understandably, is not happy about this. What would a 16-year-old girl of her size need a babysitter for? I feel like she's the one that could babysat men at Mr. Krabs' age at this point. But I guess it does fit Mr. Krabs' character to worry this much about his little girl, so, you know, if it means seeing Squidward and Pearl together, I'll take it. Pearl's main problem seems to be that Squidward is lame, a pretty understandable sentiment, and so just to ensure that Squidward stays with her, Mr. Krabs pulls out the ultimate weapon, SpongeBob. I find it really funny that Mr. Krabs actually learned to utilize SpongeBob as a method of torture for people, and seeing as how this is one of maybe 2 appearances he makes in this episode, it really shows that the writers feel confident enough to make the audience seem as though he actually isn't more than that, and it seems to have worked on Squidward, who now makes sure that Pearl doesn't set foot outside their house. What you'll notice when watching this one is that Squidward acts really wimpy about this at times. I've noticed this in other season 11 episodes too, but in this one it is pretty apparent that they turned him into way more of a pushover than he used to be, especially in regards to Mr. Krabs. But does this make the episode worse in some regards? Yes, but we'll get to that later. I first want to bring up that I do appreciate Pearl's posters that literally read hunk and banned, which I think was on her wall in a previous episode as well, but don't quote me on that. Pearl sees that her crush Dylan is waiting for her outside, so she sneaks outside only for Squidward to follow the two of them very closely, after first pumping up his bike, which was a nice nod to his character. It leads him to the local teenagers' breach party near the surface, which he immediately ruins by playing jazz music to them and turning them into geeks in the process. However, when Pearl accidentally gets trapped while jumping on land because of a dare, it is also Squidward that ends up saving her and suggests they take revenge on Pearl's crush Dylan that just ditched her when she was stuck on land, at least ending this episode on a sweet note. Rewatching this one now, I got out of it exactly what I felt when I first watched it, that there is some potential with this premise, but also not that many memorable scenes to be found. It's not that any of it wasn't enjoyable, but because Squidward was so whiny and Pearl really just led on by Dylan, the episode felt somewhat lacking. There wasn't a point where I was really invested in the story, and so I tried paying more attention to the jokes, of which there really weren't that many good ones. I could see why you may like this one, but for me it was a bit disappointing. 5 out of 10.
不要停，不要停，不。
The last episode I want to talk about today is Shopping List, and the reason I chose to do this one last is because it was paired with Mustard O' Mine, an episode that, to my knowledge, was actually aired quite a while back, so since these two were meant to be presented in a pair, this is one that doesn't really fit into this batch all that much, but I still felt like it was worth talking about regardless, so that's what we're gonna do. Deal with it. When the title for this one was revealed, I was kinda hoping for it to have something to do with the floating shopping list from Ron Krabs' Trash, which unfortunately wasn't ultimately the case, but I still like the premise of SpongeBob getting various groceries from Mr. Krabs. It's just simple enough to work, especially with Plankton also having a role in this, as he assumes these ingredients to be meant for the Krabby Patty. So on his way to get the ingredients, SpongeBob happens to stop by Sandy, who agrees to help him with the groceries in a submarine that Plankton, of course, house also happens to be inside of. Their first stop is in the cave of a Yeti crabs, which they need to get some hair from, and all manage to get except for Plankton. They next need some milk from a fangtooth fish, which they all manage to get except for Plankton. Last up, they get to the Flying Dutchman, who they need to get some dandruff from. Possibly the most random item on this list. Equally as random is the Flying Dutchman, who apparently just now realized that he is indeed the Flying Dutchman. Again, Plankton is caught before being able to get the item, and this time offers up Skull and Shoulders. A legitimately funny fake product that unfortunately isn't enough to save him from being blasted into the air, where we see Sandy and SpongeBob on their way back, only to be held up by a miraculously unharmed Plankton that decided to just steal the ingredients away from them. The Yeti crab from earlier at least gets them back to the Krusty Krab though, where Mr. Krabs confesses that this was all a ploy, so he could get the real ingredients in the meantime. Sandy is not all too happy about this, and punches him all the way up into the air, where he is met by Plankton, who suffered the same fate because he used all the wrong ingredients to try and create a Krabby Patty. This was a really nice ending to an otherwise also fairly enjoyable episode. I liked the little road trip SpongeBob and Sandy went on, and that there was some genuine tension to be found at times, in addition to seeing some familiar faces make a return and clever visuals. Nothing too fancy, just a good episode with some semi-highlights like the Flying Dutchman boasting about how great he is and these fish marital problems. This one gets a 7 out of 10. And that wraps up today's 4-in-1 episode review. Let me know what you thought of the episodes, and also if you want to see more of these batch reviews, because I really enjoyed making this one. And also check out my video on Chef Bob and some of my other stuff if you're new to the channel. That's all for now guys, take care.